think environmental education, what makes it unique is that it emphasizes this focus on knowing how to handle and investigate environmental issues and how to weigh the options and how to understand and argue with evidence so that you can then have that piece of learning, or you can then learn how to be a resident of your community and a civically involved community member, how to be a citizen of the world. And I think that is unique to environmental education. And that's the world I really spend a lot of my energy on, is how do we do that? How do we teach that? How do we allow learners of all ages to realize they have a voice around issues and concerns within their own neighborhood?
Welcome to Talaterra, a podcast about freelance educators working in natural resource fields and environmental education. Who are these educators? What do they do? How do they create change? Let's find out. This is your host, Tania Marien. My guest today is Sarah Johnson, founder and principal of Wild Rose Education, a woman-owned small business providing place-based workshops for educators, youth leadership opportunities, and environmental education consulting. Sarah has an extensive leadership background in the field of environmental education. The list of positions in which she has served as a leader, trainer, moderator, and even first responder is too long to repeat here. I have to ask, Sarah, with such an extensive background, what single event put you on the path that you are on now?
My upbringing with my parents and the rest of my family is definitely a cornerstone to why I do the work I do and the person I am today, and my values and perspectives and my passion for the outdoors, my passion for the planet. And growing up in rural Southwest Missouri on a big tract of land surrounded by a bunch of public land next to a big lake, our family values were to get out and explore and appreciate and manage the landscape in a responsible way. I was taught about all the Leopold and Leopoldian conservation stewardship values since before I was born. And so a lot of that has been in my blood and has been infused into everything I do, even though now I live in Western Colorado at 6,000 feet in the mountains. And it's a different ecosystem, but those values are still really, really strong.
I get that sense that there is a deep history there. It goes back very far. It's clear nothing about your professional history suggests that you stumbled into the field of environmental education.
No, I didn't stumble into it at all. If anything, I mean, what do they say? An apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. Both of my parents are environmental educators in the sense that they're both retired high school science teachers and worked for the Park Service and Forest Service, and it's always been in my blood. It was never really a choice. It just kind of was what I always was doing. And then I would expand upon that, though, and say that my passion for Western United States ecosystems and policy and landscape studies more generally was very much influenced by the Grand Canyon Semester Program, which was a program I got to participate in 2005 that was with Northern Arizona University. And that program really taught me how to ask questions and how to learn landscapes. And that's been really powerful and influential to my career and where I've chosen to focus my career.
Yeah, because it's clear everything was done with intention. All your certifications, the leadership positions that you've had. And I was wondering just how far back your experience went, when your journey began, because you have a gold award from the Girl Scouts, a Girl Scouts Gold Award. And I read up about that. And that is something that high school students do, right? They select a topic, an issue that concerns them. They form a team. They problem solve, they create change, some type of change related to that issue, and that's high school.
So I
That's
formed and I started and created a long-lasting nature environmental science program for the residential Girl Scout camp in my region of Missouri as my Gold Award project. So I was designing programs when I was 16 and 17 years old. And that program is still, it's gotten bigger and it's still around. So yes, you're exactly right.
oh, that's one. That's really something. That's impressive. As I understand it, you were employed by several other organizations before you started Wild Rose Education. Was becoming a freelancer a conscious career choice, or was it a reaction to a single event?
So you are correct. I did a lot of different traditional environmental education related work for about 10 or 12 years. And a lot of that was with local conservation nonprofits, and also before that with the National Park Service, and then wilderness trip organizations before that. And in 2015, I quit my job without a plan and didn't really know what was going to happen. I was in the middle of finishing my master's program. I had outgrown my position where I was working, and I had a huge amount of vision and passion and creative spirit, and I knew that it was time to move forward. And so I took a leap of faith and continued to finish my master's program. And yet within weeks, like only a couple weeks, I got a phone call from a statewide water nonprofit, and word had gotten out through my network that I was available and I needed some work. And so they hired me for a big project right then and there on the spot, because they had known me from before. And that just started to snowball into other projects. And about a year later, I was working on another project, and somebody said, we're going to need everybody's logos and, to make sure we get it on this publication we're all working on. And I was like, a logo? You mean my, Sarah Johnson LLC is not going to work? And so I asked them how long I had, how many weeks do I have to get you a logo? And so this was a good push to create a business name and create a logo. And so I was sitting on the back porch of my friend's house, drinking a beer and trying to figure out what a business name could be. And we decided that it was important that the business name didn't have a specific geography, just in case I wasn't here anymore. And so Wild Roses live everywhere. I do a lot of work around, or I have a lot of passion and do some work around wild public lands and wilderness issues and so forth. So that made sense to call it something wild, and Rose happens to be my middle name. And so it just kind of happened. And that's how the whole business has happened. It's all just kind of landed in my lap backwards. I still don't have a business plan. And it's kind of one of those things where I've always said what am I really good at? Well, I'm really good at connecting people to people and people to projects. And I've never figured out how to get paid for that. And what's happened, though, is because I have such a strong professional network across not only the state, but now across the country, it's amazing how if you just keep listening and staying aware of what people are working on, some of them are paying attention to what I'm able to contribute, and they call me up and ask me to be part of things. And I don't recommend this path to other people because there's so much unknown and so many risks. But it's been super satisfying and fulfilling and quite an adventure. And there's been days where I'm not so certain it's going to keep happening. And then somebody calls me, a couple weeks later. So that's how it has happened.
Yeah. I think the important part of your story is that you leapt.
Mm-hmm.
You went and you just did it.
And that's kind of how I function all the time. I just kind of make it up. I mean, I make it up every day, and sometimes it takes a lot of energy, and yet it's awesome. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay. So when you began, what did you believe it was going to be like?
Well, when I began, I didn't actually and like I said, I didn't ever really have a plan. If you'd asked me 3 or 4 years ago if independent contracting was the freelance environmental education work was even possible, I would have laughed. I would have been like, you're got to be kidding. So when it began, I don't really know that there was a beginning point. It was kind of like I was in midstream grad school and working full time. And so I just stopped working full time and kept doing grad school remotely. And then I had some part-time work with some other local organizations. And then it wasn't until, I don't know, that's a really good question. I've never really thought about when it began and what my expectation was. It just kind of just kept one thing after the other. And it was like, oh, and now I'm going to need insurance, and now I'm going to need an office. And and so I guess a little bit to expand on your question, I never thought it was possible. And now I realize that it is possible. And so I guess I did not expect what I'm able to make work to make a livelihood for myself.
What does a day look like for you, or a week? And what works for you?
Every day is very different, and I thrive on that. I thrive on variety, and I thrive on the excitement of what may happen or may not. And what is a day or a week? I'm a pretty highly motivated person that gets up and gets after it in the morning. And so a lot of times, like this month or this season during the winter, I have a bit of a deep time for a deep breath with work. It's a little bit less crazy. And so I find myself working by 8 o'clock in the morning and kind of trying to function on somewhat of a school schedule, only because 3 o'clock seems like a great stopping time and a great opportunity to then get out and go cross-country skiing before it gets dark. And I think that being in this pair of shoes, having this role of being an independent contractor, freelancer, I think I have to give myself permission to do that. And it's taken a few years now to be able to say, I'm not getting paid enough to not go skiing. I have to build some boundaries, and I have to remember that life's not just about working, and I live in such an incredible place. So I got to take advantage of that. And it also, I find that I'm much more productive and much more when I'm having to generate content, when I'm having to do writing projects or creative thinking projects, I'm so much more creative and more efficient when I do get out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and come back to the office at 8 in the morning the next day. And so that works really well for me. It also works really well for me to not be working from home. I have a small little office in a community center. It's an old elementary school turned into a community center. And being able to be part of a larger community of people who are incredible and do so many different things, it just adds to my creative capacity, and it gives me a community of people to be part of that I mostly love. It's an awesome group of people in this building. And so I think those pieces have helped me to be successful.
You've had many positions. I understand you're currently the board president for the Colorado Alliance for Environmental Education.
I'm actually just, as of a couple of weeks ago, the past board president.
Past board president. Okay.
Yeah.
But you are serve as a moderator. You're a trainer. You are a certified interpretive trainer, interpretive guide. How much of your current time is spent doing all of these assorted trainings?
So I think having access over the years to all these different certification programs at the national level and even some state things has given me mostly access to a lot of tools and best practices and kind of the state of the art professional field that helps me to have a greater understanding of the best way to do environmental education myself. My work is mostly around training educators and also around creating opportunities for youth civic engagement and civic development and leadership development. And so to have all the different tools from all those different certification trainings, I'm not only excited about the tools to help me be the certified person, but I'm love learning from those trainers and learning their skills and how they facilitate things and how they put together trainings. And so I like being part of that big community. And you asked how much of my time is spent in those specifics. And not a lot. I mean, it's all more morphed together, and I guess that's what Wild Rose education is. It's a morphing of it's a collision of all these different trainings and certifications and professional communities that are informing my expertise. And some of them, they give me tools for, there are specific things that you have to be able to do specific tasks. So I'm an asset in programs where, it's an outdoor, some type of training or class, and somebody needs to be a wilderness first responder. But that's not at all the focus of the workshop. It's just a safety and, a risk management thing. And so I can be that person. I'm working with a big national program right now that has a whole bunch of public land agency people involved. And the fact that I'm a certified interpretive guide and certified interpretive trainer, that means something to them because they know what interpretation is and they get it. And that's valuable to them. So it just depends on which project and which audience and which component of the program where I can fill a need. And I also would say that all of those things, what's been really neat is being really involved with NAAE, or the North American Association for Environmental Education, is that it's built this network that then collides with the network of the National Association for Interpretation. There's a lot of crossover. And that's pretty neat because you get to learn, you get to build a community. Again, it goes back to people. It's all about people and relationships and really celebrating each other's good work and learning from each other. And to have those shared languages and shared professional fields just makes us kind of one of those things where we all get better together. We all get better at getting better as well.
What has been the hard part for you as an independent contractor?
The hard part has been figuring out how to engage in money-making projects instead of money-losing projects. There's a lot of work out there, and there's a lot of people that want amazing things to happen, and there's always things to do, and I'm excited to jump in and do them. And the hard part, and yet what I've overcome, is figuring out how to get paid, and how to get paid well, or how to get paid what I'm worth. And that's been a humongous learning for me. And I've had to get away from the environmental education world and learn from business people and the small business bureau organization here in Colorado that offers all these business tools. I've had to learn things from my colleagues who are entrepreneurs in very different fields, and then try to figure out how to apply that to this world that I'm finding a niche in. And so it's an adventure. And also it's been hard to communicate to my clients or funders why things cost as they do, and figuring out how to communicate the value of education, because everybody wants education for free or very cheap or by volunteers. That's nothing new. But to say no, it's time, and time is valuable, and my time is worth as much as your time is worth. And anyway, so that has been something I was not very good at 3 years ago. So that's been hard.
You do a lot of community projects or municipal projects and that type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. How much time do you spend filling out requests for proposals and applying for different things? And then, one of the problems with being in this position as an independent contractor is that work comes and it's great and it keeps you busy, but then you're not doing anything else. And so then when that project ends, you are starting all over again, right? And having to track down work and reach out and all that. Do you try to keep the flow going all the time, or, to keep networking while you're focused on one project that's taking all of your time?
So I actually have about 4 or 5 projects all happening at once. And my projects, there are not RFPs for this kind of work. these organizations that want to hire me to do things, they're trying on things they've never tried on before. The Youth Water Leadership Program, is, as an example, was born out of this little citizen group for the county, like a citizen board for the county that has a fund of money that they're supposed to do something with around water, rivers, and river education, but they don't know what they didn't know what they needed or what they wanted, but they knew they needed to do something. And I happened to have strong relationships with members of these people. And so we sat down and talked numerous times, and over a year's time, this thing emerged. And now the county is the pays for this thing. And now it happens. This is now its third year in a row. And so what I have been finding is I don't even look for RFPs because I don't know where you would even begin to look for them. And second of all, I've been working really hard to make sure the projects I'm engaging in repeat year after year. And so, like I said, the Youth Water Leadership Program is on its third year. The Western Rivers Teacher Workshop is this will be its third summer. There's another program I coordinate called the Naturalist Nights, which is a community speaker series. And I've been doing that for 3 or 4 or 5 years now. And so I've created systems, and these systems work well and they're efficient. And so I don't have to start over every time. And I think that's one of the ways I measure success for myself is I get to repeat programs and repeat projects. And that's what allows me to go skiing at 3:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday afternoon in the winter. So my projects aren't bounded by, I'm going to start on February 1st and be done by March 31st. It seems that the way these programs that I've built, there's pieces and parts that have to happen all the way throughout the year. I mean, like if you're this Western Rivers Teacher Workshop, as an example, I have to have that curriculum pretty dialed and figured out in September, and then work with the institution that hosts that in November, and then work on all the partner pieces in January. And then I don't teach the course, it's a 3 graduate credit course. I don't teach it until June. But there's always parts and pieces that you have to do throughout the year on all these different things. I don't feel like my work fits in a box. I don't feel like it's independent contracts, but it's not like a consulting firm. And I've struggled with knowing how to describe it to people in a very short elevator pitch. And I've worked with the business community and the Small Business Bureau to go to these workshops about branding and marketing and elevator pitches and all of this. And they've been helpful to a certain extent, but then it's kind of like, yeah, I don't really fit. It doesn't really matter. And I don't feel very successful in that department. And so I just don't even worry about it. And I just keep doing the good work I'm doing. But somehow it's got to have a name. And maybe this freelancing environmental education community that you're working to create, maybe somehow we can work together to figure out what I'm doing and what it's called.
What do you feel the field needs to know or understand about people who work independently, who don't work for a national park or a nature center or a large nonprofit organization or small organization, but who move through the community in a very different way? What do you feel the field needs to understand?
I think there's something about the flexibility and the nimbleness of a freelance educator, a freelance person like myself, that is really valuable to the field because we're not tied to these big anchor institutions and very well established programs. We have a creative spirit and a creative capacity to fill in some of the gaps and to think about things maybe in a less structured way, to think about opportunities and solutions that are more from a systems approach, more a broader perspective. Or I think we're not bounded by the rules of an institution or the company line per se of an institution. And also with that, when you're you have nothing to lean against because you are your own business and you are your own employer and you are your own everything. Um, some might think that the risk is higher about how you carry yourself in in the bigger environmental aid community. However, I think that independent contractors and I think all leaders, I think people who are leaders in environmental education have a responsibility to think big and to be okay with disrupting the status quo a bit and think about structures of doing this as a business in a non-traditional way. And I think that by doing that, the field can incorporate independent contractors and freelancers in a way that they've never thought about before. We spend a lot of time in the environmental education profession talking about the need to be more inclusive and more diverse and more equitable. And that looks like so many different things. And this is just one tiny component of that, is to be able to have non-traditional workforce as part of the greater team of environmental education around the world.
Absolutely, I agree. And I've found from my observations, from things that I've observed, conversations I've had, I think part of the problem with the independent professionals being paid is that some of the problem is within the field itself. It's in how we treat each other. Because there is this blanket, if it involves nature, children, or families, it's free, right? And if it's education, it should be free.
Right.
Or and so I think that is one of the biggest hurdles to overcome.
I would agree that that's a hurdle if you're trying to do traditional environmental education work at a nature center or any kind of public land kind of place. And I don't know if I could do that from a livelihood perspective. I don't think in my community, in my region of the world here, that's taken care of. We have great institutions that do great work. And so my approach is to not try at all to do what they're doing, but to fill in the gaps where there's an opportunity that for whatever reason, whether it's their boards and funders or their mission or whatever it is that's keeping them from doing different things, I'm able to, because I'm not bounded by those limitations, I can fill in those gaps. And so it's been figuring out what those gaps are and identifying those and figuring out how I can plug in. And I still love teaching, and I love teaching out in the field. So last week, I emailed my colleague at this big, very large nature institution, and I said, I would love to teach a class this summer, maybe two, a couple of your all-day kid camps, and how can I plug into that? And so they fit me in the schedule when they can, and they pay me a little bit of money. It's not a money-making project, but it keeps me excited and it keeps me grounded so that when I'm teaching teacher workshops, I can say, yeah, I do work with kids and I do know how to do this. And it reminds me of how much fun and how challenging that work is. And I think that that's why I said a few moments ago, I don't recommend this direction to very many people, because I think we have to be extremely realistic. This is it's not something the grad student is going to walk out of school and graduate and say, I'm going to be an independent contractor and be an environmental education professional. I think that's not very realistic. And I think that there are folks who have found these gaps and these opportunities, and they've made a run for it, and they've been very successful. And some of those have been like environmental education evaluators. That's the most successful team I've seen who are trying to be independent contractors and actually raise their kids and pay their mortgage. I think being very realistic and very transparent about how we're actually paying our bills is critically important. Otherwise, we're sending a message especially to emerging professionals, that this is possible and, oh, it's easy. You can make it happen too. And I think that's a disservice to young professionals. And, to be transparent myself, I'm not a trust fund kid from Aspen. I work really hard, and I live as frugally as a grad student, and it's not a money-making business. It's a keeping all my bills paid business. And I'm fortunate to not have a lot of expenses. And that reality, I think, has to be talked about.
Living in bootstrappers mode is, you're always bootstrapping. Or like you said, you're always living as a grad student, right? Grad school and college in general, there's a very tight budget, and you get so good at it that sometimes you're too good at it, right? And you live, you go through life living that way.
Yeah. I've had a friend, a colleague who's she's part of the faculty for a big master's program. And she has a lot of students just telling her that these students are just like, oh, we're just going to start our own businesses and be our own, do these projects on our own. And Melanie's always like, Sarah, I need you to come to my class and just tell them the honest truth of how this really works. Because there's just a little bit too much idealism in her opinion of like how this really happens in their minds. So anyway, it's interesting.
What's next for you?
I always wonder about that myself. What's next for me? I'm excited to work. I just got to have my first intern. I was able to pay an intern, a student intern, and that felt really cool to be able to have another person part of the team. And so I'm looking forward to that happening again. I'm excited about this big national project I'm working with the River Management Society, and we're rolling out a river training center, which is kind of like the Arthur Carhart Wilderness Training Center, but this is specifically for river managers. And because it's brand new, I'm super curious to see where it goes and what kind of role I'm going to get to have in that. Right now, I'm doing a bunch of training for them around how to be a good trainer, how to be a good facilitator, and that's exciting. And I wonder what else, like, where is this going to go and what's my role? I'm also curious about kind of going back to, or how can I go towards spending more time truly out on the landscape? I miss those interpretive walks and talks and snowshoe walks and talks, and I wonder how I've got to figure out how to be able to fit some of that into my regular routine more, and still do these higher level office related work and program development and training development work. But because I miss that, and that's what feeds me. And I was just reading a bunch of Mary Oliver poetry last night, and it was reminding me how much I have this connection to the land and how important that is to me. And so I'm exploring that. I'm curious how I can make that happen. And I'm also really curious about how to get more engaged in the academic institutions, how to get more engaged in higher education. I would love to teach a class maybe at the community college in their education department, like a science methods class or something along those lines. And I think I'm also just so curious who may call me next week. And I don't say that with like it really happens. People really do just call me, or they send me an email and say, I'm going to call you. and then these big ideas happen. And I'm just like, wow, came out of left field. And then at the same time, it's like, no, that's what building a network and building relationships and being authentic with people does. And it's also the sense of trust in God or the universe, whatever you want to call it, and realizing that if you do keep doing good work and people know that you're honest and authentic, they just sometimes call you. And so I'm never sure exactly what's coming down the pipeline.
It is beautiful. And, your work and the people who I get to speak with through this project, I can tell you from my perspective, the field is in very good hands. And the future is very good.
Oh.
It is very strong.
It is. And it's the colorfulness of it. It's all these different kinds of people that make it that way.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it does. It does. One quick question. I am keeping you a little along, but one question
That's fine.
about your
fun.
event planner position. I was surprised to see event planner, and then I read a opinion piece from December of this year that a student of yours wrote.
Yeah, you did a lot of research. It just feels good that, thank you. I just want to say thank you.
No, you're welcome.
I don't get to talk about this stuff very much because my friends don't really get it, anyway, so thank you. This is fun. Okay, so back to the student article about yes.
About this changed perspective about what a scientist is. A
Yeah,
scientist is not just
that was
person.
Aiden.
Yes, Aiden.
Aiden's
Yes,
piece. Yeah,
and a
and he just came up with that out of the. I didn't tell him what to write. I was like, "Tell me what you write something." And I was like, "Whoa, this is awesome." Okay, so back to your question. Yes.
And so I got the sense that you help organize events. Okay. And then I was reading his opinion piece. And one of the things that he's learned from you is that science is also event planning. And as he writes, the work I did was not the lab coat and pipette kind that science often gets portrayed as. Instead, it was calling keynote speakers, giving introductions, setting a master schedule, and figuring out water bottle designs, all of which were essential to allowing the data collected to be shared.
Yeah, I was really proud of that piece because he's hit it spot on. I probably could have a sideline job of planning weddings or something and would probably do a really good job at it. That totally resonates with me because so much of our work in education and science education, environmental education is about people. And as we know, if people aren't safe and comfortable and dry and fed and all the things on that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're never, ever going to be able to teach them anything about snowflakes or river science or rabbits or whatever it may be. And so I think that I've had to become, or maybe I've always, I don't know where these skills came from, but with time, working at summer camp and everything in between, it doesn't land on our resumes very often as environmental educators, but probably conference services should be on our resumes. I think environmental education is all about people, and we have to take care of our people. And as Aiden said in that op-ed he wrote for the newspaper, his 16-year-old perception of what it takes to communicate science, I think is spot on, because I think so much of the time the world thinks that these concepts, these scientific concepts, these policy issues, these environmental issue things are, if you just know everything about the issue, you're going to be able to change the world. And I think that's not true. I think that's one piece of the puzzle. And I think that teaching students, as such as Aiden, who's 16, showing him that there's all these parts to making it possible for people to come together at a youth water summit so that the youth have a voice or have an opportunity to share their voice through, they come together and they are the content, they are the session presenters. And to make it work that can happen, we had to set up chairs and projectors and make sure the computers worked and make sure lunch was ordered and make sure we had vegetarian options. And the list goes on and on of the logistics. And for a high school student to figure that out before he goes to college, he's headed in an amazing direction. He's going to be an amazing scientist someday. He already is. And to be able to teach that and show people that whole system, I think it does everybody good.
Learn more about Sarah, her programs, and Wild Rose education by visiting the show notes for this episode at talaterra.com.